Guys, okay, louder. Bill Moseley.
Oh, look, a little it's glitter.
We had a Terrifier party for Damien today.
This is fat.
Isn't it though?
Oh, this glitter. Can I sit down? You guys okay with that?
Fabulous.
Ah. I know, it's like being in my living room. Well,
Glittery?
This is a little bigger than my living room.
So, Bill, I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, you are a staple and a highlight and a joy for most of us at a convention.
Thank you.
How long have you been doing conventions? And do you remember your first one?
I think I do, actually. I think it was a Fangoria convention in Los Angeles, maybe back in like 1990 or so. And I just thought it was absurd. I had been invited to, but I didn't really want to go to a convention. I thought, this is really stupid. And that was my kind of, attitude. And I didn't really think I was going to bring much to a convention. I remember, because I remember Vernon Wells was there, and he was signing his autographs and, as his crazy character from Mad Max. And I just, I liked it. But I thought to myself, I think I can do more than just sign a bunch of 8x10s. And so I enlisted my buddy Buckethead. And hey. And Buckethead and I, we formed a little band called Cornbugs. And the whole idea behind Cornbugs was to create cassette tapes that I could also sell at conventions, so that it wasn't just 8x10s, but there was something extra. And so that thanks to conventions, that really was the birth of Cornbugs.
Yeah.
And so in those cassettes, I don't even know, I probably have one or two, in the stuck in the oil in my garage, but that kind of led to Cornbug CDs, and those of you lucky enough to remember CDs, remember those? But anyway, so we ended up, putting out a bunch of CDs, which then led to a new band called Spider Mountain, which then led to working with Phil Anselmo of Pantera. We put out a CD called Bill and Phil Songs of Darkness and Despair. Another cheerful opus. But so thank you for the conventions. Now, I love conventions. I love horror fans, so thank you. I am one, so it feels like, hanging out with my people. And, the conventions have been really good. I've met young filmmakers at conventions who have gone on to become older filmmakers, and they've hired me from time to time, so that's good. It's really a lot of fun to hobnob with my fellow monsters. One of my favorite things to do was to get on the road with the late great Sid Haig, and come to these. Certainly, we came to this convention a bunch of times, and actually Sid and I travel all over the world, and really, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And as of last time I saw you, or maybe the time before last, you were still selling CDs at your table. Do you still do that? Because I don't think I saw some.
I do, but they're gone. I mean, I think I have one
Sold
CD.
out.
One CD.
Guys.
Yeah, so thank you guys. Right here.
Yeah.
In the front row here.
So next time you see him at the con, make sure you hit him on Friday and buy a CD. All right?
Yeah, the CDs are good. With Cornbugs, it's very funny because there was never a second take, which you can tell in some of the songs. But actually, that sounds pretty good for all first takes. We kind of made them up on the spot, and we ended up with I think we put out 3 or 4 CDs, and then a bunch of greatest hits or whatever. So, but I think we did about 50 or 60 songs. But we just make them up. So that was a lot of fun, because I love working with Buckethead, the world's greatest guitar player. And, we had that, we were kind of, had that link. So he'd play something and I'd come up with some words, or I'd come up with some words and he'd start playing something. So it's one of those rare collaborations when it really, you're into each other, you're on that same beam, so.
So Cornbugs is quite a name. How did you guys decide on that?
We were at his mom's place in, outside of LA, and I want to say Oxnard, but it wasn't Oxnard, wherever it was. And anyway, his mom's place, his dad, not to give too much of the mystery of Buckethead, but his dad was like the local high school football coach. And I think his mom was, kind of a hippie librarian or something. And their house, they had like a vegetable garden in the backyard, and they had a bunch of rotten tomatoes. I mean, this was probably like after they should have been harvested, I guess, maybe, because tomatoes were a little funky on the vine, and there was some corn, it was like 7 feet tall, a lot of big corn. So we were doing a video, and I was kind of goofing around, and I went into the corn, and I said, and I grabbed an ear of corn, I said, call all cars, and I was like, and I looked down, I looked at this ear of corn that was still on the stalk, and it had a bunch of little ugly bugs on it. I went, oh my God, corn bugs! And so that's how the title, the name of the band. Buckethead went, ooh! So it was corn bugs.
When did you start your musical journey?
Well, when I was a kid, I come from a musical family. My older and younger brothers, really good piano players. My mom was a boogie-woogie piano player. She really was into Fats Waller and Errol Garner. I mean, she was really, she liked Scott Joplin. So she was a piano player. So when I was a kid, I was, my parents, my mom, I guess, made me take piano lessons with Mrs. Catherall. That's who it was. And so I would go over to Mrs. Catherall's once a week and try to play scales. And I didn't really like the piano. I mean, it's a wonderful instrument, I'm sure, but I just wasn't a piano guy. My brothers took to it, I was not. But when my mom would make us go to, on Sundays, when we went to Sunday school, I wasn't really big on Sunday school either. But waiting for my mom to get behind the wheel of the car, I would just start, playing on the dashboard. And my mom used to say NND, which stood for no nervous drumming. And I was constantly just playing, and I had rhythm. And I went. It was one Halloween. It was probably 6th grade, 7th grade. And I went over to this kid's house named Christopher English. And Christopher English was a weird little kind of he had little gold rimmed glasses, and he was kind of an evil genius. His dad was the editor of a magazine called Downbeat, which was like a jazz magazine. And one Halloween, Christopher English, and Christopher, he was allergic to milk. He pronounced it M-E-L-K, milk. And he was a weird little dude. And but anyway, he invited me over with a couple of other guys to a Halloween party. And his father showed us Creature from the Black Lagoon. He had actually rented, an 8mm, 16mm, and projected it on the wall and everything. So that was really cool. And Christopher English had in his room, he had a set of bongos. And I started playing those, and that was much more fun than the dashboard of our old Lincoln. And so that's really what got me started. So I played bongos, and then when my brothers and I had a band, my younger brother played the piano, my older brother played bass, and I played the drums. And a friend of the family's had some old drums in their garage, so I got them. They were old, I think they were Slingerland, and they were really cool. It was a cool trap set. It was bass drum, snare drum, one tom-tom, cymbal, and a hi-hat, and some sticks. And so that started me off on drumming. And so that was my first band, actually, was the Moseley Brothers Band. And there's a picture of us, and it just says, and on the bass drum, you're supposed to put the name of your band or whatever, and it says the Mose. And it's because I ran out of tape. I was using like black tape to put Moseley Brothers, and I only got as far as the Moes.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was great music, and that was, the family that plays together, they say that, and it's certainly true in our case. My brothers and I, whatever our differences were, we just loved, cranking out the old tune, so, yeah.
And then, fast forward to how many years later, you got to do an operetta.
Right, yeah, this is the music theme today.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, I got to do Repo,
Yes.
the genetic opera.
I know we had some Repo guys who talked about it before you got here, so.
Well, it's so funny because I knew Darren Bousman. I had actually seen Repo. Repo used to be like a storefront play that somebody put on in a storefront on Hollywood Boulevard. And I had a friend of mine who took me to see Repo, and it was like literally just in a storefront. It was a bunch of people with Zydrate, and I think the lights were out, so the Zydrate was glowing, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then I remember I was at a convention, like another Fangoria convention, and I was in a big ballroom, and half of it there was like a partition that divided the room into two parts. And I was in one part doing my thing, and Darren Bousman was in the other part, I guess talking about Saw or whatever. And I heard him, like, through the partition, I heard him talking about what sounded like Repo. And I was like, wow, wait a minute, I think I saw that. And I talked to him later in the day, and I said, I think I saw that play. It was really kind of cool. He goes, yeah, I really want to, make a movie of it. And I went, yeah, that's great, good luck. Anyway, like, fast forward a couple months later, and I got a call from Darren, and he and Terrence Zdunich, who was one of the co-authors of Repo, wanted to meet me, so we met poolside at the Roosevelt Hotel in LA, which sounds very Hollywood. And I think at that show, I had given Darren Bousman some Cornbug CDs, and I do the vocals for the Cornbugs. And anyway, so he and Terrence were saying, well, we're going to do this musical called Repo, the Genetic Opera. And, we know you can kill, but can you sing? And I said, well, Darren, I gave you those Cornbug CDs. He said, yeah, but can you sing? No, so I convinced him, actually then, I had to audition for Repo. And I remember going to Hijiki's studio in North Hollywood. Hijiki apparently was like the Prince of Japan or something, Prince like, When Doves Cry Prince of Japan. And we were, they were holding auditions for Repo. And I remember, being a little nervous because, it's kind of scary. And I came into the studio, and there was kind of the control room, and you're looking down on the studio floor, and there's one of the Pussycat Dolls who is auditioning for a different part, I hope. And anyway, but she was singing, kicking up her legs. I mean, she was like Broadway and Vegas. And I was just thinking, I am fucked. No way I'm getting this one. But I take singing lessons, and I have for like the last 30 years. So for those of you, it's like a voice gym. That's the way I look at it. I always work out, keep my voice in shape. And so I had kind of worked on Night Surgeon, that song. And so I knew kind of dramatically, you start soft and then you kick it up toward the end. But I was still pretty nervous about it. And they said, okay, Bill, you're next, because then the Pussycat Doll exited. And, they didn't seem to be too particularly impressed. I'm thinking, oh my God, I thought she was awesome. And I said, okay, you're next. So, I got down to the floor of the studio and got my headphones, and I got this mic. Said, let's do a mic check. And I was like, testing, and I was like, oh my God. And I had these headphones on. I thought, God, I sound great. It's amazing. It must be this microphone. I mean, it was like an amazing microphone. And it just sounded so good. I just thought, oh my God, I love me. It was weird. Like I was just like, whoa, holy God, it's like the magic microphone. And so they started playing the song, and I was singing along, you know, and when I was finished, I remember looking up, and there's, you know, Joe Bishara, who does, you know, did most of the music for Repo, and there's Darren, and there's Darren Smith, who's the co-writer with Terrence, and they're all up there looking down at me, you know, down on the floor. And when I was finished, they all went like, you know, they loved it, like through the window, like, yeah, baby, yeah. And so then I was offered a choice. They said, you can either play Luigi or Pavi. And because I had done a bunch of, Pavi is a makeup role, let's put it that way, and because I'd done a bunch of makeup stuff, I really came at it like, do I want to sit in the chair for an extra 3 hours getting made up as Pavi, or do I want to just be Luigi? Just, you know, occasionally I do have some scars on my chest, but Luigi for the most part looked, you know, kind of like me. And so I chose Luigi just because I didn't want to sit in the chair. And I'm thinking, that was such a great choice, because I don't know if y'all have seen Repo, the Genetic Opera, but Ogre from Skinny Puppy plays Pavi. And he is so good that I can't even imagine playing Pavi. You know, having seen him, and we just had such a great time together. We became great pals, still are. But that was so much fun. So what we ended up doing with Repo was we recorded the whole thing in that same studio, in his Ziki studio in North Hollywood in LA. And then we shot the movie at a studio in Toronto, or as they say, Toronto. And I just didn't know how that was going to work out, because I was thinking, well, you know, if I have certain emotion and with certain songs, is that going to it set me so like I have to then play the character that way? I mean, how is that all going to work if I record it beforehand? But I just trusted Darren Bousman, who's a great director, and he knew the emotional tenor of every song and all that kind of stuff. So we recorded we did all the recording in North Hollywood, and then went up to Toronto and shot the actual movie. And it worked out great. The only thing I found out was that you don't lip sync, you sing along. So, you know, in other words, you can't just go, because that's stupid.
It's different because you can tell because the breathing's not right.
Yes, absolutely. So we had a ball shooting it. I love Paris Hilton, by the way. And a lot of people, when Repo came out, a lot of people were saying, oh, Paris Hilton's in it. And I thought she did a great job. She was awesome. She really, and she had her time in the chair when her face falls off. I guess that's a spoiler alert.
It's old enough now. If they haven't seen it by now, that's not our fault.
Right out there and check it out. But she was awesome. I loved Paris in it. And, I really loved, and he's been here, I think, once or twice, R.I.P., Paul Sorvino. Yes, and he plays, Rocky Largo, my dad, Pavi's and Paris' dad. And he was fantastic. He's an opera singer, was an opera singer, and really was just so much fun. It was such an eclectic cast, but it was so much fun. And we all loved Darren. We loved working with Terrence and Darren, and
Do you have any specific memories you want to share about working with Paul?
With Paul, yes. At the I think it was the
or
last.
Just hanging out with him, just something nice.
The last day we were shooting. I think Blind Mag had already been, skewered by a fence. I think we were just about.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah, we were just about done. And there was one more song to go, and we had worked really hard, long hours. Paul, was in his 70s, I think, and was really tired, really kind of, not quite burned out, but like you could just see there was very little left in the toothpaste tube. And yet we needed him to there was one final song that he had to do, or there was just one final scene that he had to deliver. And he just looked like, I think people were helping him, and, he just looked like he was done. And we really needed him to just do one more thing. And he was an old trooper, and somehow we just said, one more. And Darren, I was saying, just one more, and Paul, I don't know where he found that energy, maybe in his big toe, but somehow he just he's a star, and he came up with this final burst of energy, and it was so exciting because, of course, he did a great job, but it was also exciting just knowing the situation and realizing that he found it and gave it that last tiny bit of whatever he had left, and it was really awesome. It reminded me that it just reminded me that this acting is it's not just physical energy, but it's like emotional energy. Just somehow love, something came out of him that was really inspiring. So I've kept that with me.
That's great. Thank you. Big fan of Paul. So anyone who's worked with him, I get to talk to. I always want stories. Yeah. All right. Any audience questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any chance we're going to see you in the Texas Chainsaw video game?
Don't know. And I'm not being coy. I really don't know. They seem to be, moving along. I don't know. The one thing I heard was that Ed Neal is going to be a part of it, and that was very exciting to hear. Because I think all I kept hearing was, Kane Hodder and Scout and Sean Whalen. I'm just thinking, these, where is because there's Ed, when is his phone going to ring? So I was very happy to hear that he's going to be a part of it.
Anyone else? Yes.
What was your favorite out of the 3 Firefly movies? Like the making of and then the final product?
What was my favorite of those 3 movies?
Yeah, the favorite one to make and then favorite final product.
I like them all, and again, not to be coy, but I like them all for different reasons. It's kind of like saying, which is your favorite child? God knows we have one. But don't tell the other one. Don't tell the others. House of a Thousand Corpses I love because I got hired by Rob, and it was just out of the blue, and I never auditioned for it. And because Rob was a big Chop Top fan from Chainsaw 2. So, and I loved working with Karen Black. I loved working with Dennis Fimple. I just loved it. And certainly, I didn't really work with Sid that much because Sid is kind of at the beginning, at the end. He's not really, he doesn't have as big a part in House of a Thousand Corpses. And then Devil's Rejects, of course, it was Sid and me and Cherry. That's when we really got rolling. And I think of House of a Thousand Corpses in terms of the character is kind of like you're going to the dealership, you're going to buy a car, you're kind of looking at a car and maybe see one you like, you're kicking the tires, and then Devil's Rejects is like now you bought the car and now you're taking it out for a spin. That's the way I looked at Otis. Because in House of a Thousand Corpses, I certainly enjoyed being in it, but I wasn't really totally Otis yet until about 6 weeks after we had finished House of a Thousand Corpses. Rob wanted to shoot a little bit more stuff, so we shot the scene, I call it the Run Rabbit Run scene, which we shot separately, and I'm going, hunting humans ain't nothing but nothing. And that was when I thought, oh, that's Otis. So it wasn't until really I had done that scene after we'd already finished House of a Thousand Corpses that I really got into, I felt the DNA of Otis. And then when we did Devil's Rejects, I was really raring to go. And that was really one of my favorite cinema experiences. Because it just felt really good. I loved working with Sid, loved working with Sherry, I loved working with Rob. And so that was a big part of it. And then, of course, it's so funny because 3 from Hell was also cool because that was like 12 years later. And according to the lore of the Firefly family, I guess I survived getting shot 20 times by rifles, which is pretty hardy. And then I had been in solitary confinement for like 12 years, 10 years, whatever it is. So I remember trying to think like, I got to the set, I think it was day one. I was in the back of a police van, I'm addressing some press or something. So I have kind of a mini monologue. And I'd been thinking, now what's Otis going to be like? What's his mind? I was like doing that. And I started, it's like action. And so I'm supposed to address the crowd and I'm saying some stuff. And I fumbled a line. So I was like, cut. Okay, take two. Action. So, I'm saying my thing and I fumble another line. It's like, cut. And Rob's like looking at me like, Bill. And I said, give me a second. So, took a break. I sat down in this police van by myself and I just, kept breathing. And I heard this voice in my head that said, get out of the way, Bill. I got this. It was like Otis. And I was like, okay. I was like, hey man, hey Mr. Hollywood, what's my better side and what's that line? Just get out of the fucking way. And I did. I just said, it's okay, man. I got out of the way with all my concerns and had a great time. Just had a ball the rest of the way. Otis took over after that. Didn't have to worry about anything. What was fun about The Three from Hell 2 is that there's a scene in it, again, spoiler alert, where I'm out in the woods. It's Foxy, Richard Brake is in the woods, and a couple of bounty hunters come up. Bill Oberst Jr. and this other chick, and I get to why I'm calling her a chick. And then and they're like sweating Richard Brake, who goes into this weird sex, improv, which really was like bizarre and wonderful. And Bill Oberst Jr. is going, what the fuck? And all of a sudden his head explodes because, and Otis walks up and he's shot Bill in the head, dispatched with. And then I'm menacing this, the surviving woman. And, it turns out, and then I threaten her and then I end up cutting her face off, killing her. I mean, I don't know which came first. But anyway, that was my wife, by the way, in real life. So it was so much fun working with her. She was actually very much of a trooper because she ended up, when we shoot Bill, and his head explodes, she gets a bunch of, not only blood on her face, but she also gets a bunch of brains and skull. And if you'd watched the scene, the camera's right here. Lucinda is my wife, Lucinda Jenny, from Thinner and Mothman Prophecies and Rain Man and Thelma and Louise. Anyway, she's right here, and the camera's right here, and the special effects makeup guys are right here. And she knows that when they say action, she is going to get, there's going to be this shot, and all this stuff is going to go in her eye. It's like a banana, whatever they made that looked like brains and blood and everything. And she was very cool because they could only do it once. And so she had to sit there and not anticipate and just, let them shoot this stuff into her face. And I was very proud of her because she did a really good job. But, so anyway, I remember when Rob actually called up and said, okay, because when he said that he was going to do another Firefly movie, I said, well, hey, that's great. And, we chatted and I said, oh, by the way, if you could, maybe you could give my wife a little part or, just something. And I said it in a way that, if he didn't, I wouldn't be disappointed. But, and I said, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And anyway, months went by and he called me up and said, oh, I'm done with the script. And I said, oh, that's awesome. He goes, yeah, and, there's a part for your wife in it. And I went, oh, hey, and that's great. He goes, well, here's the good news. I said, yeah. He goes, you get to kill her. Yeah! So much fun. She had less fun than I did, but it was fun, working with the family.
Your wife is a She's a pro. I mean,
Yeah, she is.
big Thinner fan over here.
Yes.
Love it, love it. And so she's super talented in her own right.
Yes,
so
she is.
It's not
She's
like
the real actor in the family.
it's not like she's just someone from off the street.
No,
You know? So yeah,
no way.
she has the chops.
Yeah, she does.
So, any other questions over here in the front?
Did we miss out on any good Chop Top moments in All American Massacre?
Not really. All American Massacre was supposed to originally be like a 10-minute short, so that Toby Hooper's son William, aka Tony Hooper, could demonstrate his computer graphics skills. And he had just come up with this, this little, literally a 10-minute scenario. And it was supposed to, it starts out with Chop Top, who's been in a mental penitentiary for 10 years or 20 years, whatever it's been. And it's kind of like there's a Geraldo Rivera like camera crew who comes to the prison, they get Chop Top out of his, Chop Top is now called Bloody Bobby, by the way, and they get him out of his cell and interview him, like what was it like? And so then, as they're interviewing him, there's a flashback to before Chainsaw. So this is when Chop Top and the Hitchhiker were twin brothers before Chop Top has gone off to Vietnam, which is where he got, the plate in his head, he got the wounded and everything. And so it's kind of like, it's thinking forward, but then flashing back and all this stuff. So it's very cool. And again, that's the original premise, was that this was going to be just a little, short that showed Tony's skills, and they were quite amazing. And then it just got bigger, lots of different, story additions. I do remember that Leatherface was played by Buckethead, because Buckethead's a big Chop Top fan, like Rob Zombie, and they gave Buckethead a fat suit. So this Buckethead is like very tall and skinny, and so he's wearing this fat suit, and he's got Leatherface's mask on and everything. So it was quite a fun show. Not really sure. I mean, that was 23 years ago, so I'm not sure if it's gonna, ever come out, see the light of day. I don't really know. But I do know that the person who did the makeup for Chop Top is a guy named Todd Bates, and Todd was a big Chop Top fan, and he also plays the Hitchhiker in All American Massacre. And he could do the Chop Top makeup, so when I was working, he did my makeup. And right after we had done that was when I got a call from the publicity director of Universal Studios City Walk in Burbank in LA. They're Universal Studios there, and they do like a big Halloween show. And they also had included this little award show called the Igor Awards, and they were looking for an MC. And I knew the guy that was the head of the publicity, and he called me up and said, "Do you want to, be an MC at this, Halloween show?" And I went, "Yeah." I went, "Sure." I said, "How would you?" Because he offered me money. I was like, "Yeah." And this was like October of '99, and I said, "Well, would you like me to come as Chop Top, my character?" And he said, "Well, let me find out, because I don't think Chop Top's a universal character. So let me find out." So he talked to his people, and that since I had been in Army of Darkness, I was part of the Universal family. And so, yes, I could come as Chop Top. So the guy actually, ponied up a little extra cash, and I was able to bring along Todd Bates and his assistant, who did my Chop Top makeup. So I'm made up as Chop Top. I'm wearing my own little ratty tuxedo, and I'm emceeing this horror award show outdoors, folding chairs, kind of cheesy. And one of the award recipients was Rob Zombie. And my older daughter at the time was about 12 or 13, and she and her little buddy were like Hellbelly Deluxe fans, and so they wanted to come and see Rob Zombie. And I didn't really know Rob, very well at that point, in terms of his music and everything. And so I'm there, and it was time for, they show out like one of his videos, and then I go, and here he is, Rob Zombie. And Rob comes out and he goes, holy shit, it's like Chop Top. And he told me later that he'd been, when he was backstage and listening to me MC the show, that he thought, yeah, that guy's doing a decent Chop Top. And but then, as it turns out, it's Chop Top. And a month later, I got offered the part of Otis Driftwood. So, it's all part of that wonderful, garden of forking paths, the happy pieces of the puzzle. Yeah.
Someone right there? Yes.
Yes. When you filmed Night of the Living Dead, were you given like any special instructions on to differentiate your Johnny from the 1968 version?
No, not really. I had worked with Tom Savini. He was, the king of splatter. Had been the special effects makeup master of Texas Chainsaw 2. So we became friends on Chainsaw number 2. And then, months later, whatever it was, a year or two, I don't know what it was. But anyway, Tom got the job of directing the remake of Night of the Living Dead, and he called me up and said, I'm going to send you a script, and you read the script and pick any character you want. So I went, great. So he sends me the script. This was back, kind of pre-internet, so you actually had to send a script in the mail. And so I got the script, I read through it, and I thought I wanted to play the part that Tommy Tolles played, the bad guy in the basement. Because I was thinking, what's a bigger part and therefore lasts longer and pays more? That's what actors sometimes, it's not all about art all the time. So I was, thinking, I'll play that, the guy. And Carl Hardman was the guy who originated that part. And so I called up Tom Savini. I said, this is a great script, and I want to play the guy in the basement. And he goes, yeah, just pick any part, just make sure it's Johnny. And I'm thinking, well, I see Johnny, like page 2, Johnny's already dead. So I was like, oh. So, but I love Russ Streiner, and I loved, his Johnny. Of course, he's the original Johnny. And so when it came time to do They're Coming to Get You, what I did was I wanted to make sure that was the part that I wanted to make sure I got right, that line, that famous line. So I rented a movie, I rented some Boris Karloff movies, and really just paid attention to Boris Karloff and really practice it. So I was able to get, now coming to get you, Barbara. And then when we actually shot the movie, I say that when we're getting out of the car in the cemetery at the very beginning. And then we have a long walk from the car to our mother's grave. And so I improvised a second line, which was, they're horny, Barbara. They've been dead a long time. Stop it, Johnny. So, it was, so I don't know if that answered your question, but it was, yeah.
Any other questions out there? Yes, ma'am, right in front.
So with Buckethead working with Primus in the past and Primus using the dog will hunt line and Jerry was a race car driver, would you ever work with any iterations of Les Claypool?
No, but I met Les at Rob Zombie's, one of his birthday parties.
Oh, nice.
And I was introduced, hey, this is Les Claypool. I went, hey, how's it going? I said, hey, man, where are those royalties? And he went, and that was it. So I mean, we're fans, but that was as far as it got.
And one right behind you, I saw. You said.
I wanted to know, what was it like to work with Sid Haig, not only on a professional level, but on a personal level?
Oh, we had a ball. We had a ball working together. We had fun working together. We had fun traveling to conventions. Yeah, and he was a great guy. Really, yeah, always, had breakfast together. So, yeah, I mean, it was all very positive. We traveled to, France together, Germany, all over the place. So Sid was a really good guy. He was a very smart man, obviously very generous, and just a heck of a guy. And it still feels a little weird to be at conventions and things without Sid, but the nice thing is that everywhere I look, there's a Captain Spaulding face, whether it's on a tattoo or a poster or a mask. So it kind of feels like he's around. So it doesn't feel so lonely.
Sid was very loved by Days of the Dead, specifically as Con. I know really loved him. I never had the opportunity to meet him. This is before I started doing these.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that a lot of people in the Days family were close to him.
It was so funny because where I'm sitting now, Sid used to sit to my right, I guess, and what would happen is that inevitably somebody would come up and say, is there going to be a sequel to Devil's Rejects? And I'd say, hey Sid, he'd go, what? I'd say, is there going to be a sequel to Devil's Rejects? And he'd go, nope. I go, how come? And then we'd turn to this poor soul and we'd say, because we're fucking dead. And obviously we weren't. How you survived 20 rifle rounds to the head, I don't know, but by golly, Captain Spaulding.
Attributed to that steel car.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, they don't build them like that anymore.
Well, I think that's the only way you could have really done a sequel to Devil's Rejects is because you can't, my idea was, which is why I'm an actor and not a director, but my idea was that we were killed. The three of us go down to hell. We're so rowdy that the devil, rejects us. And we go back, to Earth. And, the only problem with that is, of course, then we're supernatural. And so, you can kind of, anything goes. So I think the way that Rob did it was great because, we survived, 1,000-to-1 odds or whatever it was. But, we're still mortal and, we're still, you can kill us, I guess.
We can try.
You can try. Although the way that Three from Hell, R.I.P. Sid, but the way Three from Hell ended, it was pretty open. There's me and Baby and Foxy and the three-legged dog driving off. That's my favorite part of the whole movie is that because there's the whole scene where Baby wants to drive and it's like, no, you're just gonna get us pulled over in 5 minutes. No way, you're not driving. And at the very end, as the credits are rolling, we're driving away in the desert, and there's Baby behind the wheel, and we're all very happy. So I just love that. I love the fact that she finally gets to drive. So.
You've been a part of the Rob Zombie family for quite a while, as well as a bunch of other people I called in his troupe, right?
Yeah.
Describe Rob Zombie in one word. Professionally, personally, whatever, one word.
In one word, first of all, I would say vegan, but he is. But that doesn't really answer it. Motivated. How about that? Motivated. He is. He does a lot of cool stuff. He's. I keep hearing people come up to the table and keep saying, "Man, I just saw him like a couple months ago in concert." And Rob, it was on the internet, so I'm not giving away any secrets, but Rob just turned 58. And, and he's been, and his shows are very energetic. He is kicking his legs up and jumping and screaming and singing and doing all this crazy stuff. And, so maybe vegan, something that we, that those of us who aren't vegan, maybe we should revisit that concept or something, because he's a ball of energy.
Well, I think a lot of that also is he's never stopped. He's stayed young. He's still doing what he loves.
Yeah.
And you don't use it, you lose it, and he has not stopped. He's always active. He's always, what I've seen, I don't know. He's always doing something.
Yeah.
So including performing. So he's never stopped the physicality of performing.
Yeah. And he's got a very active imagination. I remember Sherry, his wife, saying that Rob grinds his teeth at night in his sleep because he's hungry, maybe I don't know, but because he's his head is just constantly coming up with ideas. I love Rob. There are two points in Three from Hell that were really near and dear to me. And one of them was we're watching TV after we've pillaged the warden's house. We're watching TV and I think it's a Three Stooges episode where it's called Disorder in the Court. And that's one of my favorite Three Stooges episodes, and that happens to be playing, and that was Rob's favorite episode too. And then there's also one of my favorite movies of all times is The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And that's also sampled in Three from Hell. So, those two things. So we're kind of on that same aesthetic wavelength to some extent, and so it ends up being really cool. It's fun to work with people like that. That's why I mentioned Buckethead, and when you're in some kind of a creative endeavor and you're partnering with somebody who's on that same wavelength, it really ends up being very exciting and just push forward.
So you've done a lot of work in a lot of different mediums of film. Can you tell me a moment on a set that has taught you something very important that you always remember?
Yeah, I was doing a kind of a student film. I guess he had just graduated, so it was kind of a student-esque film called Daisy. It's black and white. It was like a young filmmaker, and I can't remember the plot of the thing, to tell you the truth. But anyway, we were on a set in a studio at UCLA. This was 25 years ago at least, and there was the set was this was a studio with it was like a 3-story ceiling, and above that ran right just below the ceiling was a catwalk, and I was on a set. It was like it looked like a bedroom or something. I was lying on the bed, had my hand up next to my face, and the cinematographer was up on the catwalk looking down, shooting down at our little set, and we were just taking a break, and I was lying on this bed, and my hand was like up like this. I don't know what it was doing, but just chilling, and all of a sudden I heard this, "Look out!" And before I could even really react, there was a big noise on the side of the bed, and there was just this tiny just scraping on the side of my hand, and I looked over, and it was about like an 8-pound big camera lens that the cinematographer had just dropped, and if it had probably been another 3 inches, I'd say, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys. And so what I learned on that day was that movie sets are dangerous. So be careful. That was probably my, so be careful. They say it's profound to die on stage, but you're an idiot if you die on the movie set. Although there are these exceptions, and obviously lately with Alec Baldwin, I mean there's a lot of moving parts, and sometimes it gets dangerous. Sometimes people get kind of, when they're in front of the camera, they might get a little kind of crazy and get that adrenaline going, and sometimes lose their sense of what's safe, and so it's always good if you're gonna be in a movie or whatever, just make sure everything is cool, because maybe somebody's not as concerned about your health and safety as you should be. So that sounds like a public service announcement. Be careful, kids.
It taught you something important.
Yeah, it sure did. I'm still here, so that's good. Yeah, stay alive.
Okay, any more audience questions? How about you right there? Yes.
So to piggyback off that, you've had such a cool and crazy career full of work. It's not necessarily dangerous, but what was like the weirdest set experience? Like that one that made you think, what the hell did I get into,
There have been so many. I will tell you that one of the most difficult was doing the Kahiki Palms motel scene with Priscilla Barnes. And that's where, Otis, ends up pistol raping the wife of one of our hostages. And that's not, my normal, activity at home. So I remember I was very nervous. I was very nervous, going to the set that day, and I had, talked to somebody about like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so what I did was I pulled over on the way to the set and I kind of meditated. And I just remember meditating on a lake in Wisconsin, fishing, swimming. I'm on a raft. I'm looking through the slits between the boards, and I could see the fish shadows underneath the. I just kind of went someplace else. I got to the set, and I just thought, okay, well, here we go. Sometimes you just have to, it's kind of like, was it the third Indiana Jones when he's like walking on the invisible, there's some invisible bridge or something, and you have to have faith to get across. And so I just thought, okay, here we go. And so the first time we did that scene, and it's an interesting scene too, because, it's not like running out of the class and going, okay, let's do this. This is basically coming from a place of boredom. We've been waiting for Captain Spaulding. There's whoever it was, Buck Owens on TV behind us. I'm like, oh, Jesus, it's hot. There's, it's a heat bombs. There's no air conditioning in there. And it's finally like, okay, Mama, take it off. What? And so it has to start that way. And, I went ahead and we went through that scene, and it was really, boy, it was crazy. And, I went ahead and did it. I just was through it. Priscilla Barnes was into it. The whole scene was very charged. And, we got through it. Rob says, cut. And I remember walking off the set, and there were a bunch of people in what we call Video Village sitting there watching the monitors, and some of the women, I remember, were kind of just like bummed out. It was really just, scary for them. And I felt like my gut was, it was tough, it was tight. The whole thing was, effective. And I remember walking over to Rob, and I just said, oh man, I just feel, feel bad. And it's so funny because I think about that, and I think you could have, it had been me, I would have gone like, oh man, I know, I feel you, buddy, good job. Or, you could have just said, like my dad, the Marine, would have gone, suck it up, get back in there, And instead, Rob looked at me and said, art is not safe. And it was such a cool moment because it was like, it cut through all of my stuff, and it just was like, wow. I think maybe up to that point I had thought art is safe. Maybe I was thinking about like the little velvet drawings with the big kids with the big eyes at the end of the supermarket, checkout stand. But art is not safe. That is the whole point of art. Art is supposed to shake up, society. And in that moment, I just thought, wow, that's fucking cool. Because it also told me we weren't just making a sequel, we were making art, something special. And it's so funny because then it was like time to go back and do this second take. We ended up doing about 20 takes of that scene. Because, not because there's so many different camera angles. Like there's my close-up, so that's the camera behind Priscilla on my face. There's her close-up, camera behind me on her. Then there's what is called the two scene that she'd ever done, on stage or in the movies or on TV. So it really was cool, but it taught me an awful lot. It was strange and it was tough, but here we are.
Thank you.
To wrap it up, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And that is, again, you've done a lot in the industry. Is there something in the industry that you haven't done yet that you would like to tackle?
I read a couple of years ago that Guillermo del Toro was thinking of doing an H.P. Lovecraft story called At the Mountains of Madness. It's one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories. And he was going to do it. It's set in the Antarctic in probably in the 20s or 30s. He was going to do it as a period piece, so staying true to the time. And James Cameron was going to produce it. And I just thought, oh my God. I just thought, I don't care if I would play a sled dog just to be a part of that. And I was really excited. I know Guillermo. Oh man, I really would have done anything. And then because of, there was an Alien, the movie Aliens, there was the movie Prometheus. And somehow Guillermo thought that was a little too close to what he had in mind for At the Mountains of Madness, so he never did it. But that would have been a dream project.
Well,
Yeah.
never say never.
Never say
Maybe
never.
one day.
Still here.
Exactly.
Hey, Guillermo.
Even if he doesn't do it, maybe one day it could be done.
It's possible.
Right?
It's very cool.
Thank
Cool
you, Bill.
story anyway, though.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
All right.
Everyone give it up.